Good morning and welcome to the January 3rd, 2024 Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee meeting. Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to call the subcommittee to order and invite our attorney to explain public comment.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And now we'd like to take a moment to have our interpreter introduce herself. We have Elsie Duarte with us.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, my name is Elsie Duarte. I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días. Bienvenidos a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Seguridad Pública y Justicia. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano, si va a dar un comentario público, por favor, hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Our first item of business is call to public, and I believe we have a virtual speaker.
Madam Chair, that's correct. Mr. Jeff Caldwell is on.
Hi, my name is Jeff Caldwell, and I just want to say, please do not accept any DOJ consent decree. And in the event of not accepting any DOJ consent decree, the City of Phoenix will potentially be sued by the DOJ. And if this occurs, do not hire Squire Patton Boggs as defense. Squire Patton Boggs was hired by both the DOJ and Ferguson, Missouri City Council to implement the Ferguson consent decrees. Squire Patton Boggs has many lawyers dedicated and supportive of implementing DOJ consent decrees. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Caldwell. Our next item of business is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion any nays? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 2 on our agenda is our fire code amendment change. And for this item, we'll be hearing from Assistant Chief Tim Kreis and Assistant Fire Marshal Eric Williams. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien, members of the subcommittee. I'm Assistant Chief Tim Kreis with the Fire Department, and I have with me today Assistant Fire Marshal Eric Williams, and we're going to give a short presentation on some proposed amendments to the Phoenix Fire Code.
Thank you, Chief Kreis. Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the privilege to address you today to discuss our department's proposed amendments to the Phoenix Fire Code and fee schedule, underscoring their significance to our community and the rationale behind these proposed changes. The Phoenix Fire Code serves as a cornerstone in enhancing the Phoenix Fire Department's capacity to safeguard our residents and first responders, thereby mitigating our community's overall risk. Beyond its primary protective role, the code plays a pivotal part in supporting and fostering the residential, commercial, and industrial development growth of the city. By recognizing the dynamic nature of the fire service, constant adaptation, adoption, and responsiveness are imperative to meet the evolving needs and risks of our community. As our community needs risks evolve, so must the Fire Code dynamically grow and respond by staying abreast of the latest protection and risk practices. To achieve these success in these pursuits, ongoing evaluation, review, and updates to the Phoenix Fire Code are imperative. This ensures alignment with the latest insights and practices in community risk reduction, while also facilitating developmental growth through the accommodation and consideration of new materials and industry standards. The prevailing Phoenix Fire Code, which is derived from the 2018 edition of the International Fire Code, which is a foundational national fire standard. We enhance it by integrating Phoenix-specific amendments, a strategic measure aimed at fortifying our commitment to safeguard our community and providing optimal support to our first responders. The present Phoenix Fire Code, initially adopted in July of 2019, has undergone 3 revisions to ensure its continued relevance and modernization in both requirements and protective measures. This amendment packet presented here today is likely the final one, as we anticipate a forthcoming adoption of the next major editions of the fire and construction codes in 2025. Many staff hours and engagement went into this amendment packet to ensure it meets the goals and missions outlined by our fire chief for fire prevention and the fire code. Stakeholder engagement was critical to obtaining feedback and direction. The Fire Safety Advisory Board, that serves on behalf of the City Council as an advisory board for matters relating to fire prevention, voted unanimously in favor of this packet after more than 15 hours of review, public meetings, and discussion. And I am very proud to say that for the very first time, we'll be publishing these code changes and all future fire code editions in both English and Spanish, expanding our outreach and reinforcing our commitment to safeguard our diverse community. I trust that our overarching objective to diminish risk within our community, safeguard our first responders, and cultivate a development-rich city will resonate as they served as a cornerstone of this amendment packet. As an overview, this amendment packet encompasses updates and changes across 3 key areas. The first set of changes aims to address identified clerical errors that arose during the publishing and formatting of the original fire code. These errors are primarily numbering errors, where sentence numbering sequences were inadvertently reset or adjusted, and also sentence structure corrections are made. These corrections are critical to reduce possible customer confusion regarding applicability of the code, and to ensure clarity in enforcement and compliance with the fire code. Secondly, there are updates to the code aimed at aligning with the latest lessons and measures to reduce community risk and protect our first responders. Simultaneously, these revisions incorporate advancements in technology and industry developments within the commercial and industrial sectors. It is imperative that the code keep pace with the evolving landscape of materials and industry trends, ensuring it fosters developmental growth without causing delay to construction. The fast-growing and evolving battery energy storage sector is the main component of this amendment packet. By incorporating the latest in national fire code standards and industry standards, we elevate our developmental growth while also safeguarding our community and first responders. An example of such change are mobile battery storage units. These are trailer-mounted units similar to semis and cargo containers that contain battery storage units to facilitate the powering of buildings and equipment. Current adopted Phoenix Fire Code is silent on this new technology and industry. Therefore, it lacks sufficient guidance in place to protect and safeguard those who live, work, and play near these units. With this amendment packet, we would incorporate National Fire Code language requirements that will help facilitate the safe movement, placement, and use of these systems in our community. And lastly, there are modifications to the Fire Code's fee schedule aimed at correcting miswording and bolstering support for renewable energy systems. This involves streamlining permit processing steps and fees, thereby reducing the complexity for customers and staff resources required for plan and permit processing. Through our ongoing evaluation of permit fees, time allocations, and incorporating feedback from our customers and industry stakeholders, we have identified opportunities to consolidate fees and submissions, thus creating a more efficient and unified flow. While these proactive measures are anticipated to result in a modest reduction in revenue, we believe that the significant benefits to our customer, industry partner, and staff far outweigh the small reduction. In closing, the process of creating this amendment packet started in July with our Fire Safety Advisory Board and stakeholder engagement. Through more than 15 hours of public meetings, discussions, and unanimous approval, we are here today presenting to you. Moving forward, this is the projected path of adoption for the amendment packet. As you can see on the slide, we are here today requesting and asking for your approval of the amendments. Moving forward, there would be a 60-day fee notice posting mandated by state law, but as mentioned previously, while technically we do incorporate new fees, the overall costs are either neutral or being reduced for our customer. We would look for council approval, and if granted, the amendments would be in effect 30 days after training and our customer outreach occur. With that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Chief Kreis.
Thank you, Assistant Fire Marshal Williams. Excellent job. This concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. We humbly request the approval of the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee of these fire code amendments, and if that support is granted, we intend to move these amendments to full council for approval.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any questions, members? Okay, this item is for action then. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation and your work. All right, our next agendized item is the Maricopa County DOJ investigation overview. And for this item, we have from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, Deputy County Attorney Joe Branco and Deputy County Attorney Tom Liddy. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Is your microphone on, sir?
Sibilance, there it is.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having us here. I'm one of the attorneys. I'm the chief of the Civil Division of Maricopa County Attorney's Office. The Maricopa County Attorney is the attorney for everybody in Maricopa County, including the sheriff. And with me is Joe Branco, who's one of our practice group leaders, also in the Civil Division. So the Civil Division is the division that does the advice and compliance work and litigation for the sheriff. And I was involved with the Melendrez case from 2009 on for many, many years. And you came on board that case many, many years ago and are still on it
since
to this
2014.
day. So between the two of us, we have enough institutional knowledge to be able to answer some of your questions. And we've prepared a brief presentation just to go over some of the large parameters of things to bear in mind when the Department of Justice is investigating your law enforcement agency and you're in consideration of a consent decree or potentially going to go to court and find yourselves with court orders, which could happen or may not happen. I'm not going to speculate on that. So with that, we have preliminary matters. As I said, we're with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. We advise Maricopa County. We don't advise the City of Phoenix. You know that. I just feel like I need to say it. So we're here to share with you our experiences, but not to provide you with legal advice. You have perfectly able attorneys who do that for you. And some of the information which we've learned from our client falls under Ethical Rule 1.6, that when we learn it from our client during the course of our representation, it's confidential information. And the only reason that might come up is if in response to a question I think of something, hey, that might be pertinent, but I can't share, I will not be sharing that. But for the understanding of what it's like to live in the world of monitors, federal monitors, and consent decrees, that sort of thing, we shouldn't have any issues with that. First, some basics: consent decree versus a court order. Consent decree is almost like a settlement when you and your attorneys advise you that you should just agree with the Department of Justice and that there are certain findings, certain issues that impact constitutional rights of people who interface with law enforcement, and that you set out a series of things, like an agreement, almost a contract if you will, but it will be binding on you and enforceable by the court. The other route is if there is no consent decree and the Justice Department wants to proceed, there will be a trial. And the trial, like any other, will have findings of fact. And if the judge, it's usually the trier of the fact, it's possible, I suppose, to have a jury, but if the judge finds certain facts have occurred, that will inform the judge in creating a series of court orders which will have to be complied with in order to get out of the court order. So it's, once you're living under court orders, it's very similar to living under a consent decree. The only difference is the consent decree, you're agreeing to it up front without a trial. And one of the differences is when there's a consent decree, depending on the judge and the Department of Justice, you may have some influence in what's in the consent decree. I mean, obviously you do, because if you don't agree, you don't agree. But if it's a court order, you don't help write the court order. Sometimes the judge will ask for you and for the Department of Justice to give examples of what you think should be in the court order, but at the end of the day, it's all about whatever the judge thinks is needed in order to ensure that the constitutional rights of the people are complied with. And a court order is appealable to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court. A consent decree is not appealable because it's just a contract and agreement. Common features of consent decrees and court orders. Do you want to run through those?
Sure thing. The way that you can process reading through the paragraphs of a consent decree or court order is to sort of sift them into one of two buckets. One, and the thing that tends to get and draw most of the attention, are these substantive compliance paragraphs. So what are the reforms that are being ordered? What are these substantive things that the agency or the city, in this case, county in our case, are going to have to pay for in order to come into compliance? So that's going to be based upon the specifics of the investigation and the specifics of the court's findings of fact in the case of a court order. Sometimes what gets overlooked is the procedures. So who's going to evaluate whether or not the agency is in compliance? How is that compliance going to be measured? And what limitations, if any, are going to be placed on things like how long an agency needs to demonstrate compliance with particular substantive paragraphs?
Let me just add to that an example. In the Melendrez litigation, one of the many things that the court looked at was the amount of time a traffic stop took when a deputy pulled over somebody who was white or black versus somebody on a street in Maricopa County that was Hispanic. And it was found that the amount of time of the traffic stop was longer for a traffic stop of an Hispanic. And so the court ordered a series of mandates to collect data on how long each traffic stop was per deputy and to go through training. So that's just one example of what 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs of a consent decree or a court order might look like.
The substantive compliance paragraphs often have a common theme regardless of jurisdiction. So one of the first things you're going to notice is there are going to be need to be changes to policy, procedure, and of course training on that policy and procedure. As Mr. Liddy just mentioned, there's often a data collection and analysis component to ensure that that policy and procedure and training are having the intended effect. Then there's also going to be measures of internal oversight, things that agencies often are already doing, things like supervision in the field, things like internal investigations. The way to think about these substantive compliance paragraphs is that it essentially builds a large wheel. You've got policy and procedure setting what the agency should be doing. You've got training that reinforces that. You've got the internal oversight that is influenced by the data collection. Right? Your supervisors are going to be looking at the data and recommending changes. And then all of it swings back around in a wheel because from your supervisors, from the internal investigations, from the data collection and analysis, it's going to inform policy, procedure, and training changes. And each year, that cycle continues. One thing we wanted to note was the ambiguity in terms. When looking at a consent decree or a court order, it's important to try to anticipate, in our experience, where some terms could lead to ambiguity. And the reason, of course, that that's important is because an agency can head down a path thinking that it is doing what the court order intended and the way that everyone else reading the order had intended it to be interpreted, only to find out that the energy and the resources that you've expended to come into compliance were misguided or were misplaced. And so not only are you then dealing with that setback of having a different interpretation of what those terms are, You then may also spend additional time litigating or arguing about what those terms should mean moving forward or what they should have meant in the past. So the two examples we have are just sort of common ones, things like adequate or sufficient. Again, the issue just becomes one where you spend resources not on doing the other things that are on this slide. You end up spending time arguing.
So if the city were to choose to enter into consent decree, you would want your team to work very hard to avoid any ambiguity in terms for the language in that consent decree. And if you don't go forward and there is litigation and there ends up being a court order, you would want to work as hard as you can to make sure that the judge uses terms that are not ambiguous in the court order for those reasons.
One other note on ambiguous terms, because the Department of Justice, of course, works with and litigates against agencies across the country, different agencies, different jurisdictions, different states have different terminology. And so that's another area where in our experience we've seen some ambiguity where a term is being used one way here in Arizona and it may be used differently in other states in the union.
And one way to avoid that is, it seems whenever there's litigation, it's an adversarial process. But writ large, it's not really adversarial, that everybody agrees that the constitutional rights of individuals must be protected and must be followed. And the Department of Justice and the federal judge and the city of Phoenix and your leadership in the police department all want the same thing. They all want to make sure that there's constitutional policing. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And so there's a lot of cooperation that can happen, and that can avoid, it can save a lot of time and can avoid ambiguities. This one too.
The procedural implementation paragraphs are going to address things like I said earlier about who's judging compliance. Often it's a monitor. More recent consent decrees and court orders have included things like term limits and reduced financial incentives. They limit perhaps the amount of money that can be expended on a monitor each year or for a set number of years. There's going to be reporting to the court and the public. And one thing to think about is the ways in which that reporting is done so that the judge, who's often a generalist, who will have really great familiarity, particularly if the court order is the result of trial, will have great familiarity with the department already. But how do you communicate to the court and to the public about the work that the agency is doing? Then there's always the difference between compliance on the books, things like policy and procedure, versus compliance in action. The way that it's worked in the Melendrez litigation is what the monitor calls phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is having a policy or procedure that is meeting the terms of the court order, and phase 2 is demonstrating that the deputies in the field are acting in conformity to that policy and procedure. Finally, one of the last things, and the one thing that everyone involved in the process is looking forward to, is termination of the court order or consent decree. Everyone wants to be able to leave knowing that the agency has met the substantive terms of it. But one thing that can be overlooked in the beginning is what are the goalposts and how do you ensure that those goalposts stay put?
Just as an aside, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office had one of these which lasted 37 years, Graves v. Arpaio. It started long before Arpaio was a sheriff, and it ended to that. Went from 1977 until 2014. That's a long time and a lot of money. This recent one, Melendrez, has been going on now for I think 13 years. And once the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is in full compliance, they need to maintain and show that compliance for 3 consecutive years. So if it were to end in, say, May, it would have to go 3 more years. So that would put it into 14 years. Be the earliest you'd possibly see the Melendrez court orders end. So it's, in other words, it takes a long time and a substantial amount of public resources.
So in conclusion, the two things that we wanted to highlight, again, is that ambiguity in terms. I put the words mission creep in scare quotes because it can sometimes feel to the agency as though things are expanding. It simply may have been that there was not an agreement of terms in the beginning in terms of where the outer contours of the order or the consent decree landed. And again,
on that, mission creep sounds like a loaded term, and we don't mean it that way. It could be moving the goalposts. That sounds like a loaded term. But the point we want to make is that these things take a long time. The federal judge will take very seriously her responsibility to ensure that the rights of the individuals who contact the police are protected. And if during the course of the consent decree facts change, the judge is not going to ignore that. And so there could be additional things down the road. Now, the law enforcement agency will say, well, they're moving the goalposts, or, well, that's mission creep. But the reality is a federal judge is not, and the Department of Justice is not going to turn a blind eye to new problems that are found that maybe weren't identified in the initial trial or at the time of the signing of the consent decree, but were 5, 6, 10 years down the line. They could become part of a court order.
and then additionally, having well-defined procedural paragraphs, again, with the understanding that the substantive paragraphs, the changes to police practice, are often what garner most of the attention. Having attention fixed on well-defined procedural paragraphs sets the benchmark for success. It gives you that target. And it can often get overlooked earlier in the process, and it isn't until you're further down the road that you realize just how important those procedural paragraphs are.
If there are any questions, we'll take them. If not, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liddy and Mr. Branco, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier. I do want to thank County Attorney Rachel Mitchell very much for offering to have you guys come over and make this presentation. The city of Phoenix, as we all know, has been under investigation by the Department of Justice for nearly 2.5 years now, and while we hope that the finding of facts will be issued sooner rather than later, it is important in the meantime for council members to understand to the best of our ability what this all means and what it could look like on the other side, which, as you have explained, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office has been under for the last 13 years, and based on discussions that I've had with them, doesn't look like there's going to be an ending anytime soon, unfortunately. So I do appreciate County Attorney Mitchell's sending you over and letting you share your information with us. I appreciate you both being here. And we have questions from Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. When the Secretary of Defense asked Ulysses Grant, what's your plan for the Civil War, he said, I'd propose to fight it out along this line if it takes all summer. I think that would be good advice for this council, because I can't see, and you have done nothing to dissuade me, that there is anything good about entering into a consent decree. You're basically pleading guilty, but when a defendant pleads guilty, they might get a lesser sentence or something like that. Our sentence is indeterminate, 37 years or whatever it's going to be. The costs are indeterminate, is my understanding. But we pled guilty, so we really can't complain later. And you make an excellent point about the mission creep, because they can just keep adding things even if we feel like we have an agreement. So I guess from your perspective, why the hell would anybody ever accept a consent decree? You might as well fight it out no matter how long it takes. It'd probably be cheaper. And the end result of us accepting a consent decree is going to be officers leaving, so citizens are going to pay higher taxes to pay all these extra legal bills, et cetera, to be less safe. At least that's been the experience in other cities. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. Why would anybody even entertain the notion of a consent decree?
Councilman Waring, first I want to be very careful not to advise the city of Phoenix to go one direction or another. So with that caveat, the difference is if there's a consent decree, you have a seat at the table writing it. Now, there are many cities out in these United States who have just put their hands up and entered in a consent decree and didn't actively work on ensuring things like there are no ambiguous terms. But one advantage of a consent decree is you have a seat at the table writing it. Now, whether that is a benefit to you or not, I can't tell, because it depends on who's on the other side of the table and the judge. If there is no consent decree, it does not necessarily mean that there's not going to be an enormous expenditure over the next decade or so, because there could be a trial, there could be findings of fact, and there could be a court order, which is what happened with MCSO. MCSO did not enter a consent decree. It went to trial, the federal judge found findings of fact, and the last 13 years have been the last 13 years, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think it would be, I don't want to leave you with the feeling that if you don't sign a consent decree, you're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars, because that's not factual.
Okay. I would like to understand if you can answer questions a little bit more about adding additional items once you have a court order based on, as you stated, Maricopa County went to trial and then a court order was issued by a judge. But it sounds like that court order has been changed along the way and modified. So can you help me understand that?
Well, yes, I'll give you some of the big picture and you can give some of the details. To begin with, there was a pre-trial court order. So the first court order was before the trial. And then the trial came along in 2012, 2011, and then they had the findings of fact, and then the post-trial court order came in 2013. And there were subsequent additional orders that were added. So just because you have a set of paragraphs from which you have to come into compliance doesn't mean there won't be more added later, but they have to be based on findings, so the court would have to have hearings.
So based on findings, so the DOJ would have to bring additional information to the court and then there would be a hearing?
That's correct. Or it could be that if the court puts in a monitor, the monitor could say, hey, I found some things and Your Honor, I want to have a hearing. So the judge can order a hearing himself or herself. It doesn't have to come from the DOJ, or the DOJ could come with some, or you could have interested members of the community. There are many different communities that have substantial stakes in this, the city of Phoenix, and someone might say, hey, we're experiencing this in our community, and then file something with the court, and the court will say, all right, I want to have a hearing on it. That could end up with additional court orders and additional paragraphs in which you have to come into compliance.
And can you tell me anything about, or do you know anything about monitors going back and changing the results or scores that the sheriff's office received after the fact?
I cannot.
If it's happened at all, it's been extraordinarily rare, and it would only be based on, for instance, having done the math wrong. As an example, sometimes, or in many of the paragraphs, the sheriff's office has to demonstrate compliance of at least 94% of all cases. So they'll take a random sampling of traffic stops or a random sampling of performance evaluations and determine whether or not that sample up to 94% met it. If it's changed at all, it must have been that they went back and did the math, but I can't think of any off the top of my head where substantively they went back in time and said, even though we're on the 38th quarter now, in the 30th quarter, we actually made a mistake. I can't think of anything like that.
Okay. So I think it's important for our community members to understand that in previous jurisdictions, not necessarily in the Maricopa County, when those jurisdictions enter into that agreement in principle, they're doing that in order to be able to see the findings of fact for 24 or 48 hours. So they've agreed in principle to go down the consent decree road without having been able to review the findings of fact from the Department of Justice. I do not understand why any jurisdiction would agree in principle to something that they have not been able to read. We don't do it. I didn't do it when I bought my house. I wouldn't do it if I was signing a contract for services, we read those documents to make sure they're accurate. The City of Phoenix has been cooperating with this investigation since August 5th of 2021 when it was announced. We've turned over more than 179,000 documents, 20 terabytes of data, over 22,000 body-worn camera videos, and 220 recordings of 911 calls. More than 200 hours of ride-alongs have been scheduled, 130 interviews with police and city staff. The chief of police and our city manager have been interviewed. The City of Phoenix has been transparent and cooperative with the Department of Justice. And in our fellow cities across the United States, where the Department of Justice has brought a consent decree to those cities, for example, in New Orleans, in the first 6 years, violent crime increased by nearly 56%, and property crime increased by 32%. In the first 10 years, under a consent decree in Seattle, their violent crime went up 37%. And again, the same story in Portland. After their consent decree, by 2022, violent crime was up by nearly 59%, which is almost double the national increase. I cannot begin to see the benefit to any city to have the Department of Justice be in charge of our police department and our budget. So it is important to understand that the City of Phoenix residents deserve to be safe, and we will fight for that. Any other questions or comments? Can I let Councilman Robinson?
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I think both for the audience, both Councilman Waring and Chairwoman O'Brien made the point that all of us in the council, I believe all of us in the council, the way we're thinking is that why in the world would we do something without having all the facts? And I'm a realist. I think we need to look at the information that the Department of Justice has put together and make our decisions based on that. But we can't make a decision until we at least have the opportunity to do that. So I'm in agreement with everything that has been said thus far. We just want to see what they have found, and having been a member of the Phoenix Police Department for 36 and a half years, Mr. Liddy, you made the comment that the one thing every good police officer hates is a bad police officer. And I think good police officers populate the Phoenix Police Department 99.9% of the organization. So we just want to make sure that what the Justice Department finds is appropriate. It's something that we can discuss with them, try to figure out how do we best fix something if it is something that needs to be fixed. So, I sit here and I listen. I'm glad for Rachel Mitchell to allow you folks to come over and give us a briefing. It's important for us to know. I think we've been doing a lot of that, researching other agencies, talking to a lot of different folks. And the bottom line is we just want to read what they find or what their findings are. We want to verify what they come up with and move forward from there. So everything that's been said, and we thank you for your information, I think it just helps to solidify our thought process and what it is that we want to do. And that is just to have all the information before we agree to anything. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
Councilman Waring.
It is important for Phoenix taxpayers to understand, thanks to your federal government, you're liable to pay more taxes to be less safe. The statistics in other cities bear that out. So I'm a citizen too, so that's a source of frustration. I'm trying to raise my family here, and I got to listen to a bunch of nonsense like that. It's crazy. It hasn't worked other places. It's not going to work here. To Tom's point about the consent decree, again, I stick with my fight it out along this line if it takes all summer, because we could have the best written, seat at the table, well-defined procedural paragraphs, but they are subject to interpretation, and stuff can be added later. I don't even know what I would tell a citizen if they were asking me, like, why'd you do that? To the point about they don't want us to really know what's in there, but we're supposed to agree. Probably if some business was engaging in this kind of practice, they'd probably at the Department of Justice be prosecuting them for blackmail or something. It's just crazy because they're like, look at how horrible it's going to be if you don't agree with us. And I'm sure when they started this process, they expected us to just roll over like every other city does and wind up having them run our police department for the next 10 to 12 years and pay them for the privilege. A less well-run police department, more or less overseen by people who are not, generally speaking, former police officers, from what I understand, who were sitting at mid-level jobs in the Department of Justice and now think they know everything about everything. And that led to a big mess in these other cities, as Ann just highlighted. Big surprise. Now, sometimes you reap what you sow. I mean, Portland decriminalized drugs, and now I guess they're surprised. I think we're going to have a presentation about that a little later in our show here. And that didn't work out, to the surprise of no one who's over 12, but I guess it was a surprise to their city leaders. What are you going to do? I just implore my colleagues and our citizens, let's not go down this dark path of stupidity, and let's try to make sure that we fight this out. I guess the federal government, our elected representatives, both presidential and congressional, can explain why they're running up huge legal bills for citizens if it costs us $50 million over the next 10 years. You know, the city of Phoenix budget will miss that. There will be fewer parks. There will be fewer library hours. There will be a lot of fewer things, not just police, that people are going to notice when they're gone. So again, these people, these bureaucrats, they are overseen by elected officials who are probably should be thinking about how they're going to explain these decisions, because that's what it's going to cost us. We're not going to have a choice. So I'd rather take my chances and fight it out and spend the money. We're going to spend it one way or the other. Maybe we'll spend more money fighting it out. As a citizen myself and as a representative, I'll certainly sleep better at night. But the idea that we should ever put the people who have been in charge in these other cities in charge of our police department, that's just insane. So I do really appreciate, Tom, it's great to see you. It's been a long time, but it's known each other for 25 years or something, but it's great to see you. Hope your family as well. I appreciate you guys coming down. Appreciate Rachel Mitchell and her guidance in sending you over here. And I'm sorry to get worked up about it, but this is nuts. And I don't even know how people could rationalize this back in DC, but they do a lot of things I don't really understand, so here we are. I do want to make sure to Lori, you know, in terms of our attorneys, you know, what I'm looking for is not an attorney who's worked at the Justice Department, been friends with the Justice Department, you know, any of that. I want somebody who's been fighting the Justice Department their whole career, preferably 40 years or more, and been a nasty SOB doing it. That's what I'd like to see. So that's my comments. I appreciate you indulging me, Madam Chairman, as always.
Thank you. We do have a public comment on this item. Mr. Jeff Caldwell.
Thank you all for those comments. Mr. Waring, I greatly appreciate everything you just said. I am not going to repeat what I heard, but I am going to say some things that you guys have said, but it comes from a different perspective rather than from you. Please do not accept any DOJ consent decree. The consent decrees suppress levels of enforcement. Every city that has agreed to it has seen their violent crime drastically increase. In a 12 News article recently published titled, "This is not going to feel good," Phoenix Police Chief discusses DOJ investigation. Sheriff Panzone admitted he is not running again because his office is currently restricted by a court order from 2013. However, what we learned today is these court orders can be challenged up to the Supreme Court. And I do believe that the current Supreme Court would hopefully be on the side of public safety. Panzone said the federal court oversight has become overstayed and is too focused on punishing organizations, suggesting that the ongoing monitoring was drawing away resources from within the sheriff's office. Quote, "When I have more people investigating internal affairs and compliance issues than I do crimes in the community, something's wrong, end quote. This is impacting the ability of the city of Phoenix to hire police officers. And so, again, I want to reiterate, I greatly appreciate what you all have said today. I know that you guys have more of a access to Sheriff Pinzone than I do, so I hope that you all take advantage of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, and thank you both Mr. Liddy and Mr. Branco for your time this morning and your expertise. Have a great day. All right, number 5 on our agenda is our homelessness update, and for this we will have Deputy...
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes.
Did you intend to skip over item number 4?
I did not intend to skip over that. I apologize. Thank you for keeping me on track. We will do our CAP hiring, recruitment, and metric update report from the fire department. We have Assistant Chief Ochoa and CAP Administrator Ernst. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chair O'Brien and committee members. In fiscal year 21-22, Mayor and Council approved the expansion of the Community Assistance Program to include the development of behavioral health units as an alternative response in lieu of police and fire personnel being dispatched out on non-criminal, fire, or medical emergency calls. This presentation will focus on CAP objectives, advancements made in 2023 towards these objectives, and a review of CAP's goals for 2024. CAP objectives, or Community Assistance Program objectives, include responding to 911 calls and assisting individuals and families who've experienced a traumatic event, a mental health crisis, or other social welfare concerns. We are working with Phoenix Police and Fire Communications divisions to identify ways to respond to the needs of our community which do not require police and fire or firefighter response. This alternative response model focuses on sending the right resources at the right time to those experiencing mental health and other social determinant crisis situations. The Community Assistance Program is continuously collaborating with community partners to meet the needs of individuals and ensure seamless connections to community resources for longer-term supportive services. In 2023, CAP has utilized new strategies in the hiring process. Working with the Human Resources Department in March of 2023, CAP held 5 interview events with multiple panels staffed each day. As a result of these events, CAP extended 78 job offers for caseworker 2s and 25 offers for caseworker 3s. To date, we have 73 caseworker positions filled, which includes 56 full-time caseworkers and 17 part-time caseworkers. In November, we opened recruitment again for the caseworker 2s and the caseworker 3s. We've held interviews in December and are still contacting candidates to offer positions. Onboarding for our staff takes 6 weeks. After our hiring in March, we had 5 different onboarding classes. We anticipate holding our next onboarding class in January this month, and we will begin onboarding those who were interviewed in December. The March hiring enabled the Community Assistance Program to add 3 additional behavioral health teams for a total of 4, and increased 1 additional CR team for a total of 6. We also added 5 behavioral health dispatchers for a total of 6 dispatchers. As a result of the funding for the expansion, one of CAP's priorities was to develop with police communications a mechanism to transfer 911 callers to a behavioral health dispatcher. When we began, PD Communications was already assessing 911 callers for behavioral health or mental health needs and routing and transferring those callers to Solari to speak with a clinician by phone. While developing the new procedures, the Community Assistance Program and Police Communications needed to overcome concerns with sending a civilian, unarmed team to calls that traditionally resulted in a police officer response. In 6 months, we developed the procedure, which included creating the behavioral health dispatch positions staffed by our caseworker 3s. This slide represents data from PD Communications regarding the number of calls sent from PD Communications to the Community Assistance Program since August of 2022. The fluctuations in the numbers of transferred calls over time illustrate the impact of several factors, which include the total number of 911 calls received, the assessment of the individuals and their needs and response requirements, changes in response areas, and the staffing of behavioral health units. CAP began with 1 to 2 BHU units being staffed between August 2022 and June of 2023. Those 2 units were limited in their response area to Desert Horizon and Mountain View precincts, which are 600 and 700 precincts. PD dispatchers not only had to then assess if the call could be transferred appropriately to a behavioral health, they also had to determine if those calls resided in those 2 precincts. As you can see, the numbers of calls transferred between August 2022 and July 2023 never exceeded 23 calls per month. At the end of July 2023 is when CAP increased the response area to citywide, increased the number of BHU dispatchers, and increased the number of units and hours those units were staffed. As this graph shows, between July 2023 and November 2023, there's been an increase of transferred calls with continued fluctuations in transfers every month. We anticipate, as we continue to grow and expand, we'll continue to see those numbers grow. The number of calls transferred to the BHU is only part of the picture of the work being done. This slide represents the total response volume based on the type of unit responding. The blue line represents the total BHU calls for service each month. BHU response may be generated through the 911 system, through teams completing community outreach, follow-ups on previous contacts or calls, or via requests from a police officer, firefighter, or CR personnel who are out on another call. These additional mechanisms for BHU response account for the higher number of responses on this slide compared to the number of calls transferred by PD on the previous slide. The orange line represents the CR responses. The crisis response units continue to act as a co-response with fire and police on traumatic incidents such as house fires, unexpected deaths, homicide investigations, domestic violence, etc. As we have increased the staffing on the crisis response units and increased the number of units available, we have been able to respond to more calls for service. Again, this graph demonstrates the increase coincides with the March candidates getting out in the field in July of 2023. I'd like to share a couple of examples of the work that our BHU teams are doing, which illustrates how the funds are being utilized. In 2023, a BHU team was dispatched to assist an individual with mental health and substance use disorder. The team worked with this individual for 4 hours. During this time, they were able to reconnect the individual with their previous mental health service provider. However, the BHU team assessed that the individual was presenting with an acute mental health concern, which needed to be addressed immediately, and that individual would best be served by being admitted into an inpatient mental health facility for stabilization. The BHU team ensured that the individual was safely transferred to the facility and that the plans to re-engage with their mental health provider were established. Another example, which illustrates how calls come in or may be generated outside the 911 system, is we had an off-duty caseworker who was at a medical facility who identified an individual who was in distress. The individual was at the medical facility attempting to get medically cleared to seek services in a mental health facility. When the visit didn't go as that individual had anticipated, it caused that individual more distress. The BHU team met with the individual and assisted in getting their needs met. That team provided transportation to the mental health facility and made sure that that transfer was a warm handoff. In previous presentations, we've provided current locations for our units. Those locations are illustrated as yellow stars on this map. CAP has been working with city real estate, fire, and other city departments to identify opportunities for housing additional units. In 2023, 4 new locations were identified that are scheduled to become available for occupancy in early or late 2024. The first 3 locations I'll be discussing I'll be talking about received approval from Mayor and Council to enter into lease agreements. 1 East Washington Street is a collaboration with Downtown Phoenix, Inc. to place a behavioral health unit in the downtown area. We anticipate staffing this unit by summer of 2024. 2657 West Camelback is in collaboration with the Grand Canyon University, and we are entered into a 2-year lease with this facility. CAP will be moving in a BH unit into this facility on Wednesday, January 10th. 1229 East Washington is in collaboration with the Neighborhood Services Division. This location will support the Community Assistance Program's administrative headquarters, as well as house up to 2 units, 1 behavioral health and 1 crisis response. We anticipate moving into this facility before the summer of 2024. Fire Station 62 is at Lower Buckeye Road and 93rd Avenue and is in the process of being built and has CAP office space in the design. This location will also house a behavioral health unit and is anticipated to open at the end of 2024. With the recent GO bond approval, the fire department will work with CAP to modify the old fire stations, 7, 13, and 15, to create permanent housing for CAP. This process will take several years to complete. With the Mayor and City Council's approval in 2023, the City Manager's Office is establishing the Community Mental Health and Wellness and Safety Task Force. The task force will be co-chaired by Deputy City Manager Ginger Spencer and the Office of Public Health Advisor Nicole Dupriest-Witt. The city received 77 applications for this task force. 17 candidates have been moved forward for the City Manager's review and approval. The first meeting will be held in early 2024. In 2024, CAP will continue to work with Human Resources to recruit and hire for the open Caseworker 2 and Caseworker 3 positions. The plan is to open our next recruitment this month in January. Our goals continue to be to staff and launch additional behavioral health and CR units as soon as possible. We will continue to look for opportunities to house new units throughout Phoenix to assist with reducing response time and meet the needs of our community. CAP is currently reviewing applications for a curriculum training coordinator position. We continuously evaluate and the development and training of our staff, and the addition of this position will enable us to focus on best practices and maintaining continuing education opportunities. Our casework service coordinators will continue to communicate and collaborate with our partners to ensure seamless connectivity to long-term services for those we serve. We're looking for opportunities to build new collaborations as well as participate in community organized events. We are excited to continue our work with both PD and fire communications to find opportunities to ensure the right resource is being set at the right time when someone calls 911. Thank you for your time and letting us share our successes, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions or comments, members? I'm just curious, how many positions are open right now?
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. We currently have 74 Caseworker 2 positions open. That includes full-time and part-time, and 27 Caseworker 3 positions, again, full-time and part-time.
Okay, wonderful. But you have filled already how many positions?
We have 73 positions filled.
Okay, wonderful. I know you guys have been working diligently to fill these positions at a time where it's hard to fill any vacancies across the city, never mind these specialized positions. But I appreciate the presentation and the successes you are experiencing. I look forward to hearing again in the future how we are positively impacting the citizens and visitors to Phoenix. Thank you both. Okay, let's try this one again. Now we'll have our homeless update that was continued from our December meeting. And for that, we have Deputy City Manager Gina Montez and our Office of Homeless Solutions Director, Rachel Milne. And we also have Scott with us. Wonderful. Thank you.
Good morning, Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee. We're pleased to be with you this morning to provide some information on the efforts of other communities to address homelessness. The Office of Homeless Solutions, they've established themselves under Rachel Milne's leadership in the last year and a half, and they've dealt with many challenging issues, implemented multiple strategies to address homelessness. And during this time, OHS staff have initiated dialogue with other communities regarding their efforts, and proactively, and also some at the request of the subcommittee. Other communities have also reached out to learn more about what OHS and the city are doing in this area. So today we'll provide a summary of what we have learned, and I'll turn the presentation over to Director Rachel Milne and Deputy Director Scott Hall.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee. We're pleased to be here today to provide you with an overview of discussions the Office of Homeless Solutions has had with other communities addressing unsheltered homelessness. We've spoken with and visited communities of like size or other similar attributes and would like to share some of that information that we have learned with you today. For each of the cities we'll discuss today, we have a brief comparison of population and point-in-time count numbers. As a reminder, the point-in-time count is the annual count that occurs each January where staff and volunteers canvass a region to conduct a count of people experiencing both sheltered and unsheltered homelessness. It is not the best way to count the number of people experiencing homelessness in a community, but it is a good historical reference, and it is required by every community receiving U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development funding. So this slide depicts the cities of San Diego and Phoenix's population and compares their 2023 point-in-time count numbers, noting that both of our cities are a subset of a county's point-in-time count number, but what's displayed here is the city-specific number. The Office of Homeless Solutions staff have had several conversations with the City of San Diego staff to discuss approaches, particularly because San Diego opened a structured campground this summer, and we were hoping to share policies and procedures and operational insight as we prep to open our own safe outdoor space. San Diego City Council approved an unsafe camping ordinance in June of this year and began enforcing that ordinance in July. The ordinance specifically disallows any camping within 2 blocks of schools, shelters, along trolley tracks and transportation hubs, in city parks, and in any space, waterway, or banks of a waterway. San Diego began implementing the unsafe camping ordinance utilizing an engagement process conducted by outreach workers, providing written notification and signage. After adequate notification and education, progressive enforcement was implemented where police officers were able to offer shelter when available or alternate locations before issuing a citation or potentially arresting an individual. From August 1st to December 29th, the first 5 months of the ordinance, San Diego Police Department has issued 19 citations and made 2 arrests, but that was the same individual. In June of 2023, the City of San Diego opened its first legal camping area as an alternative to traditional shelter. A second safe outdoor space site opened in October. San Diego's Safe Sleeping Program is provided on city-owned lots. The first site is able to accommodate 133 tents, and the second site is larger and will eventually have a capacity of 400 tents. Both safe sleeping sites are expected to be temporary in nature and expected to last 18 to 24 months. San Diego's program allows for pets, couples can stay together, and there is storage available for personal belongings. There is no curfew at the sites, but there are rules, including no on-site substance or alcohol use. Sex offenders are not allowed on site. And very similar to Phoenix's safe outdoor space, San Diego's safe sleeping space is a referral basis only. Some of the services offered at San Diego's safe sleeping space include tents, showers, meals for participants, security, restrooms, and housing navigation services. And here is a picture of San Diego's safe sleeping space prior to opening. And as you can see, it's similar in nature to Phoenix's in that everyone is issued a uniform tent and is provided approximately 10 by 10 space for that tent. In speaking with our colleagues from San Diego, we've learned that a camping ban in certain areas of town has been effective in clearing those areas, but not necessarily in addressing the underlying issues of homelessness. The city is still struggling with adequate shelter to offer individuals prior to enforcement, and the city is not punitively citing individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness due to shelter capacity. Criminalization is not the goal of the ordinance. In addition to our discussions with the City of San Diego, we've met with or visited other communities as the opportunities arose, including Austin, San Antonio, and Portland. This slide depicts a comparison of Austin's population and its 2023 point-in-time count numbers, again noting that the PIT count is not always the best gauge of numbers of people experiencing homelessness in a community. In September of 2023, the City of Austin sent a delegation to Phoenix primarily to learn how we at the city were able to stand up so many shelter beds so quickly, and they were in the process of doing a similar effort. Their delegation met with the Office of Homeless Solutions, Neighborhood Services, the Housing Department, our Phoenix Police Department. We also brought in Maricopa County and the City of Mesa's homelessness court team prior to taking them out to visit our Washington Street shelter, the Human Services campus, and a tour of our safe outdoor space site. Deputy City Manager Gina Montes, our representatives from our Office of Homeless Solutions, Vice Mayor Ansari, and members of the District 7 team also took time in October to go and visit sites near the City of Austin, including a nationally recognized 51-acre master plan tiny home community called the Community First Village, which is run by a faith-based group called Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and it's just outside the City of Austin limits. It currently houses 350 individuals and is in the process of expanding to house 500 people. Additionally, we visited what was a structured campground in the City of Austin. It was established by the Texas Department of Transportation to address a problem of campsites in under and overpasses in the state. The site was originally operated by the state of Texas and had very limited services. The state transferred operations to a nonprofit service provider called the Other Ones Foundation, and it has since converted to a low-barrier, non-congregate shelter site, which will eventually have 200 units, adequate community space, and has some very innovative workforce programs in partnership with the City of Austin. And this is a picture of that 51-acre tiny home master plan community, the Community First Village, providing supportive housing to people experiencing homelessness. Some of our takeaways from our visit to Austin were that in order to operate a structured campground, it is important to have appropriate service providers and connections for people to end their homelessness. We were impressed with the innovative workforce projects that the city and its nonprofit partners are collaborating on, and OHS is working on several workforce programs that we feel are needed in our community. We were also impressed with the very large master plan tiny home community outside of Austin, Community First Village. However, we noted that it required a large amount of private investment and had limited government funding in its development. And finally, like all of the communities we'll speak of today, the focus in Austin is on permanent supportive housing, which is a high priority need, not only for the development of more properties, but ongoing funding for the operations of such programs. Next, we'll take a look at the City of San Antonio. And here again, we have our comparison of population and 2023 point-in-time count numbers. In October, we also visited San Antonio area. We toured their Haven for Hope campus, which serves approximately 1,600 people per day on its 22-acre site. The campus serves many populations in different designated areas, including their lowest barrier courtyard site, traditional congregate shelter, single adult shelter, youth shelter, and even family shelter, all on one campus. The Haven for Hope campus has multiple service providers on site, many of whom rent space there to be in close proximity to their clients. There are currently 42 partner organizations providing on-campus services. The San Antonio community is focused heavily on shelter and permanent supportive housing services as well. We visited permanent supportive housing sites, including traditional multifamily sites, as well as a tiny home site in San Antonio as well. The city has a strategic plan that calls for building or preserving 28,000 affordable homes and developing 1,000 permanent supportive housing units over the next 10 years. Our group was impressed with the site-based harm reduction center we visited in downtown San Antonio, where individuals can participate in needle and paraphernalia exchange. And also, lastly, we visited a drop-in center that the city of San Antonio recently was able to open because they received a HUD youth demonstration grant in the last few years. And this is a picture of that Haven for Hope campus, the 22-acre campus that started in cooperation with the city of San Antonio and the business community in 2010. In San Antonio, we learned that Haven for Hope, a large-scale campus, can operate without a negative impact on the surrounding community. The campus does not cap the number of people it serves in order to be able to offer everyone needing a place to be with an indoor solution. The Harm Reduction Center we visited provided site-based locations with an exchange requirement as opposed to providing handouts, which can reduce the negative impact of drug use paraphernalia in a community. And finally, Portland, Oregon's population and 2023 pit count comparison. In May, representatives from the cities of Phoenix and Avondale, Maricopa County, and Maricopa Association of Governments visited Portland and met with many groups, including city and county officials, nonprofit providers, and business leaders working to make change in their community. We spent time learning about their voter-approved tax that will raise over $1 billion in operational funding for service providers over the next 10 years. We also spoke at length about the community's commitment to creating shelter, conducting proactive outreach, and creating and preserving affordable housing in an increasingly unaffordable market. We visited their Safe Rest Village, which is a non-congregate emergency shelter created on city-owned properties with various modular units. We visited one of 6 Safe Rest villages that are planned in the community. This slide provides some more detail on that voter-approved tax that I mentioned, which will provide operational funding to service providers in the community. It's called the Metro Supportive Housing Services Program. Metro is a regional group that covers Portland metropolitan area and 3 counties that overlap there, and it's governed by an elected body that oversees this tax funding. The tax is structured to affect only a portion of the population in the community. It is a personal income tax of 1% for individuals earning over $125,000 per year and $200,000 for those filing jointly. And it is also a 1% tax on businesses with gross annual receipts of $5 million or more per year. In the first year, the fund raised $336.6 million. These funds are to be used for operational purposes only, including shelter, supportive housing, outreach, mental and behavioral health services, and rent and utility assistance. The goals for the 10-year fund are to connect 5,000 chronically homeless individuals with supportive housing and stabilize 10,000 households at risk of experiencing homelessness or experiencing homelessness in permanent housing. And this is a picture of one of the Portland Safe Rest Villages and their modular units. Some of the main takeaways from our visit with Portland leaders were that Portland has really gotten behind the Safe Rest Village model as an alternative to campgrounds. They are closed campuses that have been able to open in communities with minimal impact to the surrounding neighborhood. The metropolitan area has very strong business and community support, which resulted in the voter-approved tax and general support for innovative solutions in the community. They also had strong champions in the business community that help with messaging. And lastly, the state may not have seen the desired results of their 2020 ballot measure, which eliminated criminal penalties for possessions of small amounts of drugs. Overall, from talking to the leaders in the communities we spoke about today, as well as others that we have relationships with, we feel that the City of Phoenix is seen as a leader in creating shelter capacity, and our approach to encampment decommissioning is recognized as widely humane and compassionate. Modular units are an innovative and dignified solution that could be beneficial in our community if funding were available for the capital and operational costs of this intervention. And finally, affordable housing solutions should be our future focus as our community has increased shelter capacity dramatically in the last few years. We now need to ensure that housing is available to support people in ending their homelessness. Housing is always the solution when working to end an individual's homelessness. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Rachel. Councilman Waring.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I asked for this to be put on the agenda. Part of it sprung from 2 trips to California that I made last summer. For those who hadn't been there in a while, I hadn't been there in a while. San Diego, what a mess. I went there Memorial Day. It was just crazy. Whatever you thought the zone looked like down on Jefferson, they had a large swath of their city that looked exactly like it. Then I followed it. They came out, might have had something to do with it, they came out with a world ranking list of cities most inundated with homelessness, not in the country, around the world. Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, they were well represented on that list. That might have spurred some action, I don't really know, but shortly after I was there, their city council by a 5-4 vote, a lot of controversy said, we can't have this. People aren't gonna wanna come back. They're right, I was one of those people. So but we booked another trip for Labor Day, and I was shocked at the change. It looked like a completely different city. Now, we had put out several quotes saying we couldn't possibly get rid of the zone in time to comply with the court order, but then with half of it still left, with about a month left, we were able to do it. So my thoughts about what we're talking about here has changed because I asked for this well before that court order date, and we were able to make an enormous difference down in Jefferson, so I applaud you for that. But San Diego was like a different place in Labor Day. In less than about probably 2 months, what is that, 2.5 months of the summer, they completely changed the whole look and feel of their city, except for one block that was curiously still extremely zone-like. There was a heavy police presence everywhere you went. At their light rail stops, which I think we talked about maybe the last meeting about a month ago, they had security guards at their, I think they call it a trolley, but same basic principle. They had security there. It looked like permanent security. And they certainly were trying to push the encampments away from the downtown area where visitors go, where all the hotels are, where the ballpark is. I did read some of the, not transcripts, but the news reports from their city council meeting. And I think some of the council members were like, we build these sidewalks and we get all this public infrastructure and then people can't use it. And it's true, you couldn't walk on those sidewalks. You couldn't get anywhere close to those sidewalks. Now, I go out in the morning and I walk. Sometimes when it's dark, that time of year it's lighter. Honestly, I feel like a fool doing it. I mean, it didn't seem safe at all. And then they were able to change it. So I guess my question, first of all, regarding specifically San Diego is there anything they're doing that we're not doing? If not, why not? And is there anything they're doing that we can't do because some court case or Justice Department or whatever? In other words, if they're doing stuff that worked and we're not, I want to know why. There has to be a reason.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we have a lot in common with the City of San Diego. Scott has spent a lot of time talking not only with their police department there, but their equivalent of the Office of Homeless Solutions. I think the one thing that they have that we maybe don't have is that sort of limited camping ban. Ours is really sort of targeted in the area around the Human Services campus, certainly. Theirs is much more widespread, encompassing areas around schools, areas around parks, et cetera. So I don't know, Scott, if you want to answer anything else, any other insight you have.
Rachel, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Yeah, just to echo what Director
Scott,
Milne.
I'm sorry, could you bring your microphone a little bit closer for those of us who are older?
Is that better? All right, sorry about that. You know, just to mimic what Director Milne was mentioning was those specific areas where they've were able to enforce without shelter availability. But what we've discovered through communication with their law enforcement and their teams is that, yes, they can cite the 19 people that they've cited, but they've had 0 prosecutions on those 19 because when an individual goes and says there wasn't adequate shelter to be offered, it kind of gets thrown out. They struggle with shelter capacity there as well, so that is still kind of an Achilles heel to the enforcement and the accountability of the piece. We have been trajecting toward certain ways. We, worked closely with our partners with the canals and eliminated camping on the canals. We're working on that through our alleys for safety concerns and operational concerns for the city as well. So we're trajecting in the right direction for accountability while also building up the resources to hold people accountable.
Okay, so
I
of course.
have a quick question. So those 19 citations that you said were not prosecuted because when they go to court and they express that they were homeless or that there was not a bed available?
Yeah, in my communication with San Diego PD, specifically the lieutenant who's over the homeless issues over there, mentioned that the 19 didn't follow through with prosecution because the defendants then mentioned that they did not have shelter or space to go and the cases got thrown out.
Okay, so if a space were available and they declined it and then were cited, your understanding would be that then they could prosecute it? I realize it doesn't seem that, or do you know that, has that occurred?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I can't speak to the legality of going down that path. My assumption would be that with adequate shelter capacity and offering of services and documentation of that it could be.
Okay, thank you.
So we could do, Madam Chair, some of these things we've chosen not to. But we, as a committee, could forward something to the city council after discussion at, say, the next meeting.
One of the one thing in specific, the camping ban, I have been discussing with some folks. So yes, it would be very much my desire that we have a camping ban instituted in a limited capacity, like San Diego did, around schools and around other shelters and whatnot. So yes, we could discuss that and ask staff to move forward and bring something back.
Then I will consider it fortuitous that you are chair of the Public Safety Committee and we're ahead of the curve. Excellent. So
thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing that. Anything they did, we should try to do. I won't bore you, but Gina, probably Rachel as well, you know how many times I've contacted you since our last meeting. I think my personal record is I had a meeting with the firefighters on December 21st, like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I think by that point, I'd already contacted poor Jeff Benza, Merry Christmas, Jeff, 7 times, 7 different incidences about homelessness, including one who was sleeping in a car right outside my house. I had noticed the car acting strangely over a period of time, sure enough. And my point here is all of those folks look pretty able-bodied to me. The one outside my house, like 50 feet from my house, was, a younger person. I guess, again, just because you have a job, I understand maybe you can't afford housing in this climate, but it is a good start. So I just get to say, no, I don't really want services, I'm good. You're not good. You're sleeping outside my house. And I told you it would come to this, and there it was. I mean, it's all over Paradise Valley Mall, which actually isn't in my district, but it is pretty shocking. I haven't even told you about this morning's incident. Police have been sent. I hope there's not a dead body. That's all I can say. It was a male and female screaming obscenities at each other. They've been pretty loud a couple days before. It's just out of hand everywhere. So whatever we need to do is whatever we need to do. I hear a lot about dignity and respect. You're not exhibiting dignity and respect. Respect is something that I think should be earned if you're urinating on the no trespassing sign right outside a public parking lot where people are inevitably going to be driving by and seeing you. You're not exhibiting respect if you're defecating right outside City Hall, which was observed by a member of our staff. You're not really exhibiting dignity or respect if you're doing unmentionable things facing the street on 7th Avenue. Also seen by a city staffer. Police went out, investigated, what could they do? They didn't actually witness the behavior. So this has got to be a two-way street. Why am I concerned about this? So I have dear friends who have actually 3 daughters, but one's now graduated and one's a senior at ASU. They live down by in the riverbed. I'll explain why I'm mentioning that very specifically in a moment. One now is a freshman at Creighton's Medical School, or first year at Creighton's Medical School. We spent a lot of money as a city setting that up. That's been great, revitalized a kind of semi-abandoned mall. That's all terrific. Talked to her younger sister who's getting ready to graduate. Hey, you think about going to Creighton with your sister? And no. Okay, what about U of A? I hate saying that as ASU alum. What about U of A? She doesn't want to go because her sister's had so many experiences that were negative because now she lives downtown instead of Tempe and the riverbed. We're chasing away our medical students? Can't happen. It's not sustainable. So whatever San Diego was going to chase away the tourists, and they realized their peril, or at least 5 of their 9 members did. Now, the sister who's still at ASU and lives down on the Tempe riverbed, she asked me, she goes, hey, where did all the homeless folks go when you disbanded those encampments? I'm like, well, I think we're probably seeing them all over the city. Well, she said all of a sudden she gets woken up every night with screaming and yelling, just like I saw this morning at the Paradise Valley Mall, down in the riverbed. Probably pushed them back to Tempe. Tempe had been trying, according to news reports, to push them our direction. Here's what we can't do. Just say, you know what, and that judge was right about on Jefferson Street, you can't just abdicate your responsibility and let it go. So not prosecuting just because somebody says they didn't have a place to go, or when I contact police and they go out and talk to the person's like, no, I don't need anything, I'm good. You're not good. You're sleeping right under a no trespassing sign. Right under it. Paradise Valley Mall. So we got to make this a more uncomfortable experience. So I get the whole you can't criminalize your way out of it. Well, maybe we should try that, because what we're doing right now is not working. And so it's great that we cleaned up the one area, but we're ruining people's quality of lives. I mean, what am I supposed to say to the medical students who are like, yeah, it's kind of dodgy, I don't know, I wouldn't recommend somebody else go down here? Can't have that. So, you know, I would appreciate anything that we're not doing be packaged up, Madam Chair, and brought to us. And I would say at least being contacted and potentially having a court date, even if people aren't convicted, helps. Because it makes it maybe sort of in your face, I can't, this is not sustainable. This is not a lifestyle choice. That one morning, that was crazy. 7 different calls I think I made. I won't bore you with the details. You know, people have already probably formed an opinion one way or another about this issue. So activists will write, he's terrible, whatever. This is not something that we can let happen. And Portland acted foolishly, and San Francisco acted foolishly, and I could go on and on. Let's dare to be different. Whatever they did, go do the opposite. San Diego's the one who I saw a demonstrable difference. The news reports and the people I know in these other cities, particularly Portland, people don't even want to go down there downtown. And we're spending a fortune down here on various projects, and I'm just afraid we're going to chase away the goose that lays the golden eggs, pays for everybody's salaries here. So I appreciate you looking at this, since it was at my instigation. Obviously, the situation has changed somewhat because we did address the court order, so, you know, but that doesn't really change the underlying issues that, you're right, it probably spread throughout the rest of the city. And I'm a little tired of, I think we agreed on the number, about 7,000 folks in the city of Phoenix, that they're sort of the sun, and the other 1.7 million of us sort of revolve around that. That's not dignity and respect for the rest of us. Let's try to hold people to a higher standard. I've heard the word accountability one too many times here. Haven't seen a whole lot of evidence of it. There might be some individual exceptions, sure, but broadly, I just feel like 7,000 people are giving the rest of us the finger on a daily basis. I'm just going to do whatever I want, and there have been plenty of quotes, I've trotted them out at these meetings before, that reporters have gotten from some folks. No, I'm an adult, I don't need to go to that shelter, whatever. Yes, you do. Know how I know? Because you're living on Jefferson. That's how I know. That's not adulting. So please, let's just try to move forward as quickly as we can. But I appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Councilman Robinson.
Oh, Madam Chair, thank you very much. You know, this presentation, and thank you very much for it, both Rachel and Scott, it's invaluable, like the previous presentation from the County Attorney's Office. And we can never get too much information. I'm a firm believer in that. Yeah, I think the more information we have, the better positioned we are later on to make better decisions. That having been said, I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to tour the safe outdoor space down at 15th Avenue in Jackson. Can you give us a little bit of an update? And anybody who hasn't been there yet, I strongly suggest you take the opportunity to view it, because all the positives that we just heard about from all these other cities, the things that they're doing, it appears that it's what you have there at the safe outdoor space. Can you just give us a real brief idea of how that's coming along, where you're at with that?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Yes, the safe outdoor space has been operational since November 1st. We currently have 43 individuals there as of today. The majority of them are camping in one of our designated camping areas. However, we have installed 2 of the X-Wings that are intended for our future shelter site at the safe outdoor space. And some of the residents, either that are working or are very vulnerable, are in those X-Wing sites. Since opening, we've served well over 75 individuals. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but 60% of the people that have left the site have left for other indoor shelter, or even we've actually housed someone directly from the safe outdoor space as well. So we're seeing some initial, early, really good outcomes from the site. We are still under construction, so we're not fully in the site, as we will be very, very soon, and under the canopy. But so far, the city staff that is on site, as well as our partners and the Human Services Campus and Community Bridges, Inc., are really getting policies and procedures set, operational plans set with this smaller number of individuals.
And thank you. And you mentioned something in there, Rachel, about all the other partners that are on site there. Bit of a commentary on my part. I think if we are to work our way out of these problems that we're seeing, it's going to be a collaboration of partnerships, a collaboration of ideas, and folks all coming together, because these aren't simple problems. You know, you've heard from Councilman Waring, and you know, I'm a strong believer in holding people accountable for their actions, and you know, I think us getting more information as to what the other cities are or not doing will be helpful to us. But I will say, and I'll say this in closing, I think you guys are doing a great job with what you're faced with. It's a really big issue, but I'm glad you guys are there. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Robinson. And we will, yes, Gina, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. One of the things I did want to clarify is that we, in the city of Phoenix, we do have an ordinance on the books, an anti-camping ordinance on the books, and that is utilized on some occasions. The difference with San Diego is they have it kind of those limited areas that Rachel spelled out. But I wanted to, and we can certainly bring back, you know, some alternatives for the subcommittee to consider on enforcement. But I did want to just reiterate that what we do have in common with those cities on the West Coast is those Ninth Circuit court, you know, requirements that one change is that you have to have either an indoor location, a shelter, or an alternative place for them to camp. And so any enforcement really it's critical that we have places where people can go, and that's why we've emphasized in the last few years especially increasing the number of shelter beds so that we have some place for folks to go. And we are you know, methodically, and I know it's often not as quickly as people would like, we are addressing those problems where they occur, and we have particular emphasis on certain hotspots that we're hearing about, and so we are really doing our best, and always can do better, but we're really working hard to address them as quickly as possible, any encampments, but it is critical that we have places for them to go. Otherwise, again, we still have the competing injunctions and court orders. We have the federal court order that also requires that we have alternative locations for people to go. And so we also want to make sure that we don't inadvertently do something that then gets our ability to address encampments restricted even further. And so we're very careful about when and how we do enforce and having those services available to folks. But completely agree with, you know, the need to balance the needs of the entire community, and also the importance of having accountability and personal responsibility as a resident, whether you're sheltered or unsheltered. And so we are on board with that, and the point is very well taken. Whatever the desire of the council is and how we approach these issues, we will do our best to make sure that we kind of stay within those guardrails as far as the different court orders, and make sure that we comply with everything in a way that enables us to continue addressing those problems in the community as best as possible.
I appreciate that reminder that we are under that court order from the Ninth Circuit, as well as some others. But I do think it is worth discussing to make sure that where we can do limited enforcement, we bring that back to the subcommittee to discuss and look at. Councilman Waring?
Yeah, I would hope that when we go to court, when is that? Am I not close enough to it? I apologize. I know you hang on my every word, and I don't blame you, so I'm kidding. I'll get closer here. Thank you. You know, there is a narrative out there that every single person out on the street is mentally ill or, I guess, so fueled on drugs they can't work. I guess I'll just give maybe 3 examples where I would hope we would take these to the court and go, you know, we're kind of coddling here a little bit too. So we had an issue, it was on the border of District 3 and District 2. Laurie Bays knows it well. There's a drainage or tunnel underneath Cave Creek Road, and we've been getting complaints from citizens for years, people living under there, filling it up with garbage, and the water can't flow through, so it backs up, yada, yada. I was told repeatedly we couldn't possibly put grates there to block people from going down there, but eventually we did. Within a month, somebody who'd been living under there, I presume, somehow went and got a bolt cutters or a hacksaw and cut through the nice brand new, I don't know how much it costs us to put the thing up, grate to get back in there. That's not somebody who's helpless or can't think things through. They could be filling potholes for us, cleaning streets. We have plenty of openings. What the hell? You know, that just drives me crazy. Second, we heard from Parks last month, and I would definitely like an update about what we're doing there as well, Madam Chair. Maybe this isn't the time, maybe we don't have time, but next time for sure. We had a park staffer say, well, you know, people are sleeping in the park, and the police come, and they know if they step like right outside, they call up the county assessor's website, I guess it is. They find exactly where the border of the park is, so when police tell them to leave, they like step over the line. Well, hell, I'm probably enough of a technophobe. I doubt I could probably call up the county assessor's website and do that. Again, that's not somebody who's so out of it that they can't work or function. Third, I had a really interesting experience, and it just, again, irritates me to no end. Again, me revolving around them than the other way around. Take the family up to Sedona for a couple days before Christmas, and the gym doesn't open till 6 now instead of 5. Why? Because I got homeless sleeping in the parking lot of, you know, it's a nice resort. It's not the nicest, but it's a nice resort. I like it. Because people were sneaking in. They don't have enough security to like sit there, because that is what they were doing. I had seen them. And I've also seen people who were homeless coming in there, washing their clothes in the sink and so forth. So rather than deal with it, the resort moved the hours back so they'd have more staffing. I go up to the gym at 6 o'clock, and I had seen in the summer a homeless guy get kicked out by security. So he had kind of a distinctive look. I recognized him. So I'm walking into the gym now. Here we are a few months later. He walks in. I'm sure it's him. Sure enough, he goes in, uses the gym, spreads his stuff around. They don't have anybody monitoring it. Then he was in the sauna, and he started complaining to me that the sauna wasn't hot enough. Now, he's not paying to go to the gym. He's living in their parking lot. And then he said, oh, and it's really bad. The hot tub was down a couple days ago. This sense of entitlement and the world needs to revolve around me, you got to knock that off. And I can kind of see, given some of the discussions we've had here, how that happens. That's absurd. Absolutely absurd. Now, that's Sedona. We can't do anything about that. But the other two, I guess I would point out to the judges, you know, this coddling you're doing and this saying, oh, you're helpless, you know, we can't. That's got to stop. Yes, there are people like that, and we need to try to help them where we can. But if you drive around the city the way I drive around it, and you look at the times I'm calling in to our police and say, oh, there's somebody in the median panhandling, they're not supposed to be there, it's dangerous, I come off an off-ramp, inevitably, including this morning, there were 3 at 7th Avenue and the 10, you come around the corner, you're like, oh man, there's somebody. I've actually seen people out in the middle of the lanes blocking traffic, so you're kind of hijacked into paying. I don't do it, but I've seen other people do it because they're stopping you from proceeding to wherever you want to go on the off-ramp. That's actually happened. You know, at some point, can't have it. And so I would like those examples to be included in our petitions to any courts where we tell them how nuts they are for letting things get to this point. Because you're telling me because of these court cases, there's a limited amount that we can do. and that's outrageous. Not your fault. I appreciate it. I would respectfully align myself with Kevin's comments. I appreciate what you guys are doing, but we need to really get you guys the tools to do more of it. But anything that smacks of, oh, you cut down our new gate, you know, obviously we put that up so that you wouldn't go down there. It's not safe. We don't want you down there. And you got the wherewithal and the money to go get a bolt cutters. You got you got an iPhone so you can look up the county assessor's website. But then I get parents who are like, oh, I'd never go to a city park. You know, there's needles. How many discussions like that you want to have? I appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. I would also like to touch on something new that I think will be helping us, and if maybe we could get an update. Community court will be starting next week, and is there someone here who could give us a quick briefing on how that could help us with our homelessness population?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we actually have someone at the table who can speak to that a bit, which is Scott Hall, and we also have David Ward coming up to the table, our public defender.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the council, or of the committee, we were really excited. The community court is getting started. Next week will be our first docket. It should be small. We're trying to work out. There's a lot of moving parts. We were excited about what Councilwoman O'Brien envisioned a long time ago, and I think we're really now seeing come to fruition. So we're excited about that. We've worked very diligently with the Office of Home Solutions, with the prosecutor's office, thank you, with the court, and I think this is going to be a, well, I don't think it is. We're going to have a major impact in what we're trying to do here. One of the things I did want to say is, Councilwoman Waring, one of the things you said in the last couple of meetings have made a lot of impact, which is we have openings and we have people, and how are we not putting these people into
Only
those?
one?
What's that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Of the many things you've said to have impact. So that's something that I was hoping that we would be able to address as well. So perhaps that's a way people who are eligible and qualified could get those positions. So that's something we're working on. But we're very excited. I think everything's in place. A lot of people have worked very diligently and worked very hard to make this thing effective, and I think it's going to be very effective.
Can you just explain a little bit about how the process will work, David or Scott, and what this opportunity is for folks who might find them in part of in the court system as a result of a ticket or being arrested?
Certainly. This is going to be an opt-in court, and by that means the only reason they're going to come to us is going to be cited. They're going to give us a citation. They're going to be charged with a misdemeanor in our court. And the question then is, how do they want to move forward? If you don't want to go into the services, if you don't want to take advantage of what the city is going to be offering, you don't have to. You can go into a regular courtroom and you can take your chance with that. And I think that'll have its own difficulties. But if these people do wish to go into the services that are being offered to them, then they'll go into the special courtroom, which will be presided by the presiding judge, who's going to be the judge sitting there. There they will have contact with the navigators. They'll have contact with the defense attorneys. They'll also have contact with the Office of Home Solutions, whoever is going to be able to help them navigate through whatever issue it is, whether it's behavioral health, mental health, or whatever that issue might be. Now, to stay in the court, you're going to have to perform. We've talked about this before. Lack of performance means you get to leave and you get to go back to a regular courtroom, which will be significantly less, genteel perhaps, than what they might find in our specialty courts. The reason we believe that it's going to be successful is because we have such success in our Veterans Court and our Behavioral Health Court already, which are both same thing, opt-in courts. If you don't want to participate, you don't have to. If you pretend you want to participate and then you don't participate, then you'll find yourself out of the court and back into a regular courtroom. So we're very optimistic. I think this is going to be a very good system.
Scott?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, and David, thanks for stepping up and responding to that. And just wanted to talk about I'm sorry, the intended impact of this, and we've already seen it. Councilman Waring, member of the subcommittee, the word accountability has been intentionally used by our office and people we're working with because that was a word that hasn't been used in the past. And we're really trying to change the narrative and the action of the efforts we're taking, and community court is one of those. Some of our first participants, we saw them elevate the clients that accepted that court admission and then in the process and stood a little taller, and we're very appreciative of the efforts because the court didn't take away any responsibility for them and didn't reduce any actions needed to be taken. It actually increased all of those things. And that increase of accountability with the right supports in place is helping change that individual's life, and we're hoping that they continue on that path. So the intended outcome of this is that people don't recidivate in unsheltered homelessness or homelessness in general, not recidivate through our justice system, and to be productive members in our community and hopefully maybe give back to the same system that helped them out. So really appreciative for the question, and we're looking forward to the court going.
Thank you both very much for that update on community court. I'm so very excited for it to start next week, for the opportunity for the members of our community to participate. Additionally, I'm incredibly appreciative of the work of city staff to make this happen. I know everybody has worked really hard, and I look forward to getting an update later in the year so that we can see the results of all the hard work of many departments and many outside agencies too who will be helping to lift these folks up. We will be monitoring this program closely to make sure that we have that accountability and that transparency in it. So thank you for today's update. If there aren't any additional comments, I really appreciate you all being here and providing this information. We have 2 reports on here for information only. Are we okay, good with that? We have one last call to the public. I believe we have Ann Ender to, nope, okay, no call for the public. Any future agenda items besides the one you already requested, Councilman Waring?
Yes, Madam Chair. I am interested. We had a discussion, it was just a regular council meeting, about speed. We also discussed it here. Mm-hmm. So the officers and how they post speed limits and so forth. So given our shortage of officers, I'd like to know sort of the interaction between posted speed limits, officers out on the streets, speed enforcement, what they're seeing out there, because it is an issue that's a big one, and we have been trying to get more motor officers. I've actually seen a few, which I went years without seeing an officer on a motorcycle, but I have actually, probably in the last 3 months, maybe I've seen them 6 or 7 times. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how are we changing things? What routes do they take? I think the public might be interested in that. I'm probably not articulating it well, but it's something I'd like to talk about.
I think we've got it, and if we need further clarification, we will follow up. Councilmember, okay, great. So we have covered all of the items on our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Her leading our state. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jay. Thank you. We're getting there. Let's see. Well, I do want to thank our speakers for being with us today. We had an exciting announcement, and it was just great to have all of you with us. So thank you, David, Michael, Governor Hobbs, Lisa, and Sandra. We appreciate your support today and always. And we really want to go back and thank all of you. Many of you aren't here today, but those of you that were able to be with us, thank you for the role you played in the success of Super Bowl 57.